Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Limelight Podcast. I'm Maddie, and I'm here again with Dr. Sloan, and we have a lot to talk about today. We're going to hope to answer a lot of common questions that you guys have. So without further ado, let's jump into it because we have a lot to talk about.
All right. Yeah, there's a lot going on these days.
There's a lot. There's all kinds of stuff. I think, we've anyway, got a lot of questions, so let's just jump right in.
All
Um,
righty.
Something that a lot of people question, um, your policy, I guess, is to treat Borrelia burgdorferi first, if that is something that people have. And a lot of people wonder, okay, well, why don't I do a SOT for EBV first or Bartonella or, the list goes on and on. It's a very common question. So can you tell us a little bit more? We've talked about it a lot, but it is a really confusing topic.
Sure.
Why do you start with Borrelia burgdorferi?
So, as I understood it from a long time ago, and I'm Lyme literate back when Lyme literate wasn't cool. When we used to crush up herbs and we didn't have all these fancy little tinctures and antibiotics and things like that, we learned a lot about Borrelia burgdorferi and why Borrelia burgdorferi is actually the only diagnosis for Lyme disease is Borrelia burgdorferi, according to the CDC. Why is that one different? When there's, a list of other Borrelias, I don't know, maybe 15 other Borrelias. So as we know, Borrelia burgdorferi was created in a lab from what I would say were pre-existing European spirochetes that have been around for millennia in us and around us. We find spirochetes in the mummies 5,000 years ago. I don't think they were life-threatening back then, but maybe they were. It's the fact that Borrelia burgdorferi is a new genus. The DNA of Borrelia burgdorferi has the longest sequence of bacteria in history. It's the smartest bacteria that we clinically study. It is a bacteria outside of the body. It's a virus inside the body. It can hide in biofilm to protect itself. It hides from antibiotics in biofilm. It can go dormant, although SOT works on persister cells and through biofilm. And we can talk about that. Um, so when you take a coronavirus, and which is the common cold, there's over 100 of them, and then you do what's called game theory research, and that means that you try to make it more contagious and harder to treat. That's basically what the nice fellow Dr. Burgdorferi did. His work, I don't think he meant to cause such a biological weapon, but now that we know that it's been genetically modified and it's that hard to treat, um, our immune system can handle all these other things that we've been around for so long. But BB is the starting point because it causes the most damage in the human tissue. It suppresses our immunity. It drills holes through our tissue. It can move a quarter of a centimeter through tissue and not use the bloodstream.
Ew.
So
So it doesn't, is it just drilling little
yeah,
holes?
yeah.
Ew.
And it's as far as we know, the only pathogen that can get into the hard tissues of the body, like the disc materials in our back, our neck, through the spine, and the hard tissues in our joints, because we know it causes autoimmune diseases, and it likes to live away from blood flow, so it's trying to protect itself, and it secretes enzymes to suppress immunity. That's why we measure natural killer cell functions and T cells and things like that. So that's my starting point. It's nothing that you're going to learn in a book, um, but it's the starting point, because once I get the bad guy off the table, then we see the immune system wake up. Chassie and I both had patients today that had co-infections that have been eradicated 6 to 8 weeks post SOT. So that's the starting point. Uh, it's the most harmful bacteria that we have in the body. So getting rid of that is the first point for me. maybe not other doctors, if you're not using Lyme literate tests and you're just doing SOTs, then you don't know that starting point because you don't have the experience to see the sequences that it can happen after it's gone.
Right. And if
It's a
you're
very
not
long
doing,
explanation.
I mean, I know you do more testing consistently than I've ever experienced myself from any other doctors. So you're able to see kind of the more testing equals more trends, more data, more information that you can make decisions based off of.
Yeah. I'm trying very hard to make sense of the madness of this disease and the thousands and thousands of tests I've seen. And I think we're over 500 SOTs now. So I get to constantly see sequences. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I make the graph. We can call it IgM hump, the IgG hump, the left hump, right hump. And my patients get stuck in the trough, and that's the chronic Lyme area. And once we have an SOT, we can actually watch the immune system move that along through the sequences. Whereas for antibiotics, it doesn't do that at all. It just will take them down, turn them off. You remove the antibiotic, they go back up to probably where they were.
Right.
And you're just moving back and forth. So whether it's IgM, IgG in the trough, antibiotics don't really create that. You can't really test a patient post antibiotic treatment. Either they hide in the biofilm because you're using non-lipophilic antibiotics, or or it makes it hide so you don't see the antibodies anyway.
Right.
So, and
Well,
if
I
you're
know
on it,
that, based on my personal tests, you can see that because when I first started getting it, didn't test because I was pre-hump. And then I tested for it. I was on antibiotics for 2 years, and then tested, and it was mostly gone. And then a few years later, I didn't get a new bite or anything. And I had really, I came in and was like, I have joint pain again. And my labs lit up, and I was like, I think you remember, you were like,
what
you have
happened?
Lyme disease. I was like, yeah, well, so that it was just a matter of me not actively treating it. And as soon as I kind of was like, I'm gonna go live my life now, it's like, cool, well, we're coming back. Um, so
Yeah. And then there's triggers, like for a lot of my kids, teenagers to in their 20s, including mine. My daughter had 9 IgG bands. My son had 10.
wow,
We considered them fairly asymptomatic, but my daughter could not get over her mono since she was 17 and she was 22. My
right,
son, he's just a boy. So he hasn't had mono. So, you give them mono or another virus, and then it really triggers it. It's just too much for the immune system, and it overwhelms the immune system. It's the most overwhelming. Another reason I start with it is the most overwhelming, uh, distracting part for our immune system. So I see patients like I saw today, which a lot of people know, at 40 something, he almost had every single IgM on
wow,
that you're supposed to have when you're a child. But
right,
he's had Lyme for a long time and multiple cases of Lyme. And now I can actually see a test, and I can probably tell you if you've had Lyme more than once. And if you don't act the way you're supposed to after SOT, now redo your test, you can kind of see if you're not pulling off your hump, if you're not sequencing, then you probably have a second RNA sequence, but it's still Borrelia burgdorferi. It just has multiple replication sequences.
that's actually a really good thing, I think, to talk about, because I know it's confusing to me, and I think it's confusing to everybody. The difference, or specifically what you're doing with the SOT, because I think people get species and strain confused.
Yeah. Oh boy. Sure.
So,
Yeah.
when we talk about species, we have the Burgdorferi as a species,
Right.
Epithelium as a species. There's dozens more.
Carini, Mayani, there's a
Yeah.
whole lot of them here.
So those are all
Americana.
things you would get a separate SOT. You would test separately for those. You would get a separate SOT for those.
Yeah, so Borrelia burgdorferi is still Lyme disease, and it's still the one that causes the most trouble. So if you don't slide correctly on your on your post SOT follow-ups. And if you don't have the symptom changes, throw the paperwork away. The first question I ask a patient, how are you feeling? That's more important. That's more important than the Western blot. And it always is. So I don't want people to get caught up in the numbers because I'm trying to make sense of a disease that doesn't make sense. I'm trying to make sense of numbers that nobody's ever made sense of before. I'm trying to validate your feelings. Like you feel better, good, your numbers are better. You feel worse, well, your numbers are better, or your numbers are worse.
Right.
Well, if your numbers are better and you feel worse, it's other things. But that's why I'm so comprehensive for this crazy. I got to cover all funguses, all viruses, all bacteria, all hormones, mold. If you don't do the whole picture, you're going to chase rabbits that go in circles. Um, I think I lost your question. Oh, so Borrelia burgdorferi has over 100 RNA sequences. Like we're all humans, but we have different birthdays.
Right.
So we have different ways to replicate. So our genetics are different. Well, there are a lot of Borrelia burgdorferi bugs, but they were born on different birthdays. So they have different RNA sequences.
So if you get an SOT and it goes, you've gotten tested, you have Borrelia burgdorferi, with like the MDL test, you wouldn't know what RNA sequence you had. You just know you had BB, right?
Correct.
So then it would
So,
go to the lab, it would go to RGCC, they would do their testing and they would know, okay, you have these 4 strains, RNA sequences, and they would make your SOT for that. Is that what they do?
so the SOT and the way the technology works is the technology only gathers the main RNA sequence that's replicating the most at that time.
Got it. So it's for one RNA sequence. That
It's
makes
for
sense. That makes sense. Okay.
one RNA sequence, the most replicating sequence, but there's a great possibility that it's going to copy down for multiple sequences.
Got it.
It's a great possibility. I just can't say that and guarantee it. I know they're making it for the one. Now they start with 150 blocking potentials for each patient, and they go through sensitivity and validation studies to come to the one that's the most relevant for that patient. That's how painstaking this technology is.
Really cool. It's like, I'm such a nerd about it. I think it's so cool.
Now, we're going through a video from their last conference in Texas of the man who makes SOTs, and I'm trying to get permission to post that for everyone to see. And it just absolutely doesn't make sense much to anybody because it's a whole lot of genetic talk. So people ask me all the time, what do they find? And I say, they found the main RNA sequence. Well, what is it? It's a bunch of GCs, Ts, and As in different combinations. It doesn't make any sense that for me or for anybody else. It's just, they did their work and they found it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So it is possible, not likely, but possible that if your bands aren't going away, you maybe have a second RNA sequence that was maybe as proliferant. Is that a word?
Yeah, prolific. Yep.
Yes.
And there's also another way to look at it. Like I felt great on my molecules, and then during the 5th, 6th month, my symptoms started coming back. Well, that's one way to know that you either got reinfected by a spouse, a bug, or that there's another sequence that's coming out that wasn't completely covered. Maybe it diminished it, but it wasn't completely covered, and or you just didn't feel better at all. And then I painstakingly looked through all of the data. What did I miss? Are your EBV markers high? Did your myco flare? Are you in a mold toxin environment? So yeah, in time, we can always figure it out. It always will make sense over time, through time. Unless there's another possibility is that it's caused so much damage that success also means that I stopped you from getting worse.
Right.
The degeneration inhibited and you're holding put. You're still sick.
Right.
You have a lot of a lot of body damage. You're still sick, but we have success. Now let's make sure the bug is gone, and then let's go do some healing work.
Right. Well, and that's what I expected for myself, and what I found for myself was, it wasn't like, boom, I'm fine. I still recognize that, I had these little improvements as I started to get better. And I was like celebrating each of those, like, oh, I had more energy, or like, oh, my mind was really, I had a really clear mental day, or, oh, I'm, feeling really motivated. My depression is not as bad, or my anxiety is not as bad. And it was just like little steps to get to where I was, or to get where I am. And now I'm looking back, even it's hard to remember what it was, because now it's been almost 2 years for me. Now I'm like,
Yeah.
I ate
Yeah.
gluten the other day without even realizing it. I ate a pasta salad and I was just didn't even realize, and I felt fine afterwards. It's like, well, I'm cured. That was it.
Fantastic.
But that's a good segue into what I wanted to talk about next was, what do you do post SOT? What are the trends in the labs you're looking for? What are you kind of looking for people who come back and they say, I still don't feel great? What are like the next things that you do?
Well, you know that I always start. I believe that funguses, and I think very strongly of this opinion. I think acute candida issues, and patients who've had candida for a long time, which have a lot of leaky gut, because candida makes a holes in your gut that makes all these immune system reactions and poisons your body and your brain. Um, that's sometimes a bigger deal than Borrelia. I had a patient 2 weeks ago, debilitating illness and body pain. When she came in for SOT, I go and meet her. She was like 90% better just from the antifungals.
Wow.
So if I didn't do that, her SOT is not going to have success, even though it's going to have success. She's not going to feel it.
Right.
So starting point is get rid of the yeast. It's not worth even testing. Get rid of it. The medicines are harmless. And we know that candida can get into the brain, just like viruses and bacterias, and it causes the same immune system sequences. They all three cause immune system sequences that end up with neurodegenerative disease. So what was the question?
So what we're doing after SOT,
Oh,
after for labs, talking about labs.
yeah. So when I have it, when you put in SOT and I have your antifungals and I do a follow up, usually 6 to 8 weeks, we've probably had a lot of email transfers or phone calls just to take care of little things. I'm going to go back and look at viruses, bacterias, co-infections, which I don't like to call co-infections. They're just infections. And see if anything has popped up that wasn't able to pop up before. Like if you have Bartonella and it's hiding because Borrelia is causing your immune system reactions, sometimes we do see it come up as an antibody because the immune system wakes up.
Right.
And it can go take care of this. Sometimes the EBV may flare, sometimes it goes down. So if you feel better or you don't even, or if you feel better or not at all, I still check anything from the past that looks like I can follow it through this situation to know if I need to treat it after I treat Borrelia.
How often do you have a patient that their only problem is Lyme and they just do the SOT and they're fine, other than my mom?
Wow, great question. Not many. Yeah, great question. Not many. Um, Not many. I think we all have candida. Um, Candida causes more global brain fog than Lyme. Lyme causes specific neurological symptoms because it's in part or a part or parts of the brain. So you get neuro stuff like, I can't remember my mother's name, or my
Right.
foot, I can't walk, or um, specific neurological symptoms that can be related to neurological issues. And then candida just causes global brain fog because it lives in the gut, it poops and pees all this waste, and it clogs up all your neurotransmitter functions and inhibits our brain to work.
Right.
So I check anything from the past I need to check to the future, and then I treat it and I go from there. I don't think I've been giving antivirals in a high enough dose. So lately I've had some really good improvements with patient yesterday. All her pain is gone. Even though she still has Lyme, she has CDC Lyme, all her pain is gone through antiviral protocol.
Was that for EBV?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. But I can't drop her antivirals because then her Lyme flares
Right.
and she feels that again. So here's another example of the starting point is Borrelia. I medicate her, I control her virus. Her immune system can work on the Borrelia, but take her off a real high dose antiviral, and then she has all the pain back.
And then it's not like her immune system's going to be successful ever against getting the
Right.
Borrelia. It's just going to fight and fight and fight and fight and not be able to deal with anything else.
Right. Yeah, we're just controlling symptoms.
So is the next plan for that patient to get an SOT and then be able to hopefully get better from the Lyme and then wean off the antivirals?
Yeah. Everybody's in that kind of a different place with it. Sometimes they just come in and say, just treat this. This is what I know, and this is all I know, and this I think this is my problem. We find other things they may not want to treat. I find everybody. I reach everybody where I can,
Mm-hmm.
and not everybody wants to do the same things. So we have to find ways to help as
But
much as we
you generally, I think this is like what I'm getting to is generally you find that most people have several things. It's like a melting soup pot of issues, and you have to kind of peel away the layers and get each one.
Yeah. Another thing to say based on that same question is that if I do find Bartonella or Babesia, Duncani, or Microti, it's very, 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 very unusual if I don't find Lyme.
Right. Because, most of those co-infections are all fed to the ticks.
Yes. Yeah, they're all in there.
All
I think how many spirochetes and bugs can a tick belly hold? Like a whole lot? Hundreds? I don't know.
Well, Willy Bergdorfer knew.
Yes. I need to memorize that book.
Everybody, and if anybody listening or watching wants to learn more about this, a great book to read is Bitten by Chris Newby, Krisnewby, I think her name is. It's a fantastic book, and she's done a lot of excellent research on where Lyme has come from. Yes, great book. And
it's my computer stand, by the way.
What?
It's my computer stand.
Oh, very valuable for more than one reason. Where did I want to go next? Let's see. Oh, okay. So this is a good segue. So you're retest, your people come in and you're kind of, the way that you process things is like peeling away the layers of the onion and saying like, what is causing you the most distress right now and what can we fix to remove symptoms, right?
Yes.
So, we were talking about this earlier, but in conventional medicine, they throw antibiotics at you and they say, take this course of antibiotics, 2 weeks of doxycycline, and then you're cured. But they never come back and retest. You never get a Western blot again. If you aren't better, they just say, oh, well, you are crazy. You have post-Lyme chronic syndrome or whatever they call it.
I don't even think they call it that unless you're at a specialist.
There's some name that they came up. It's like post-Lyme
post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome.
Yes, which is the silliest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's like, it reminds me of being diagnosed when I had Lyme and I had a rash all over my body. The dermatologist said, oh, you have urticaria. And I said, that's a fancy word for a rash. And I still don't know why I have the rash.
You have red swollen skin, erythema migrans. I mean, if they don't notice that as a dermatologist, they're just very useless.
Yeah.
But yeah, dermatologists are good for cutting things off the skin. No disrespect, but they don't even understand mast cell reactions because it's not a skin reaction. It comes from the inside out.
Right.
So, just put a steroid on it.
So what is your counterpoint to that conventional mentality of throw antibiotics at it, don't ever retest?
Well, you can't retest with antibiotics because it doesn't make any sense. So you either make the bands hide or you may bring them out more. One of my friends, I've been treating his family for a long time. He had rheumatoid arthritis so bad that his kids would bring him in the back of the car, and we would go out to the car to treat him.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
Back in that day, I was running LabCorp, Western blot. He was negative, completely 100% negative. Even with Epstein-Barr, you should flag a 41 band on IgG. So if you don't flag a 41 band and you've had Epstein-Barr, something's wrong. So time goes by, maybe even a year or more, and his joints are so infected that I give him minocycline to treat his joint sepsis. And I redid his Western blot for LabCorp, and he was all 3 IgM positive. So for him, antibiotic, break, retest, Western blot, and I actually brought it out of hiding, and there was some immune reaction. But that's because I gave him minocycline and not doxycycline.
Right.
Doxycycline is water soluble, non-lipophilic, so it would have just made deeper and deeper problems, more neurological problems. And by the way, he did a bike ride across Europe, and he was the only American to finish out of like 200 people. Only 10 finished, and he was the only American. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
He needs to write a test. So we should have him on the podcast.
He's a great guy. Great guy.
That's awesome. I think, it's one of the things that's been so frustrating to me.
But he's also had 2 SOTs and stem cells twice.
Oh, wow. We should do a whole episode about stem cells too. I know a lot of people, including me, I have a lot of questions about that too.
I have a lot to say about it. It's really good.
But what I was going to say is, with all this COVID stuff, it frustrates me that more people are more sick in this country with Lyme disease and have been. And Lyme disease is the biggest epidemic in this country. And there's no push. Like, why are people not test for Lyme? Why don't we do more testing? And it's funding and testing. Why don't we get some funding and testing for Lyme disease? Maybe some research.
Ask your fellow New Yorkers why everybody on the block has Lyme and they just all think they're fine. Or Connecticut, everybody, my patients from Connecticut, everybody has Lyme.
Yeah.
And Connecticut has the highest neurodegenerative disease rates, the highest Lyme disease rates. And once you treat it with antibiotic, everybody thinks they're fine. And then 5, 10, 15, whatever years later, they develop neurodegenerative diseases and they just get another diagnosis and some more treatment. So here's the deal. Imagine this novel disease that was designed by Dr. Berdorfri, and long-term for chronic Lyme patients, it causes so many autoimmune diseases. We spend so much money on these autoimmune diseases that it is more than chemotherapy money every year.
Right. So
the biological immunosuppressant agents for lupus and MS and rheumatoid and myasthenia gravis, they're at $6,000 to $8,000 every 6 weeks. And there's so many more people that have those in cancer that it's more money than chemotherapy. So it's one of those things that the system is not going to change easily because there is a whole lot of money that goes through it.
Well, I'm even thinking about people, it's amazing how many people I know in the Northeast that, oh yeah, I had Lyme disease, but it was fine. I took antibiotics and no big deal. Or my cousin had Lyme disease and they took antibiotics and it was no big deal. But yet these people have, a heart condition, chronic eczema, obesity. I think those things too are things that people don't necessarily think of as autoimmune diseases or chronic illnesses, but there are these chronic problems from having constant low levels of inflammation, constant levels of histamine, their immune system isn't working properly. So even if they're fine, their bodies are not in a place of homeostasis. And now everyone just kind of accepts like, oh, I have eczema, I have rosacea, I have, it's hard, I can't lose weight. This is just how I am. Or, I've got, stomach problems. I just have a weird gut. It's just me. No, that's not how you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to, live and be healthy and have nice skin and good digestion.
Yeah, if I could scream this to the top of whatever mountain to everyone's ear, an autoimmune disease only describes, or any diagnosis only describes the symptoms that are characterized by that diagnosis. They have nothing to do with why you got the diagnosis.
Right.
So when Lyme disease is a diagnosis, it actually describes that you have a bacterial infection called Borrelia burgdorferi. MS just says you have, on an MRI, I see multiple sclerotic lesions, period. Well, how do they get there?
Right.
We know, I will say that we know that 60 to 80% of autoimmune diseases, when we study them and we study groups that do check these patients for Lyme, it's in 60 to 80% of the autoimmune diseases. And I don't even think they're testing properly. So
Right.
Denver Brain Institute did a study for their Alzheimer's patients and found like 100% of one group had Lyme.
It's crazy. And,
So
I've
yeah,
seen a lot of other studies that say a lot more with a lot less information. So,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
definitely, and, it's a whole mindset thing too. Cause I only will talk to you about my health now because I had, either PCOS or endometriosis or some kind of issue like that, which I don't really care about getting a diagnosis with that because, like you said, it doesn't matter.
right,
Going in and being like, well, here's my symptoms. The only answer is like, they just want to slap a label of the diagnosis on it and then give you a pill and send you out the door. And I'm like, no, this has not always happened to me. It just started happening. I want someone to help me figure out what I'm doing or what's going on that's making this happen. It's not supposed to happen. It
yeah,
didn't need to happen. So what's going on? And nobody else besides you that I've ever worked with has that mentality of like, okay, well, these are your symptoms. What's the cause, and how do we eliminate the cause of the symptoms?
right, right. I mean, you've been through a heck of a journey. It's great to see you like you are, so vibrant and intelligent, and and the journey continues because it's not very easy to be healthy these days. That's a
Yeah.
whole different topic, but
Well, I still have issues and I'm still, I still have my hormonal, whatever's going on with me hormonally that is messing me up. But, I know that it's just a process of getting to the bottom of
yeah,
the issue. It's
yeah,
not, I'm not okay with just saying, oh, I have endometriosis. I'm that. And I know a lot of people that just say, I have endometriosis, and they don't change their diet. They don't go see different doctors. They don't try alternative therapies. They just think
right,
that that's how they are going to live the rest of their lives. And
right,
I'm not doing that. I'm going to figure out what's going on. I'm going to rebalance whatever is messed up. And
right. Yeah, I don't think I haven't discussed this with anyone. I think but in July last year, the one time I was in the woods with waders on and blue jeans, I got a bite on my knee. It turned into a septic joint.
mm,
I was gonna have to have surgery, but I know to inject a joint with Recephin. It got better. And then weeks later, I developed fevers and encephalopathy, and like I feel like I have my major concussions with a fever again, and so I'm positive IgM Rocky Mountain and positive CDC Lyme. Um, so I'll expand on that one day. I can relate to most of my patients,
yeah,
and we're all in a journey. I'm not sitting here on the moral high ground trying to convince everybody that we got the most miracle cure in the world. I heard a doctor say that SOT is not a miracle cure. I don't know many things that are, but it's the best cure with the least amount of side effects that we've ever had for Lyme disease. So you and I both get asked so many highly technical questions. And most of the time, the question doesn't even make sense because somebody's trying to be so technical that it doesn't make sense.
right,
So at the end of the day, I'm going to still say we still have the best treatment, the most scientific treatment that we can use for this this Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi infection that we've ever had in
right.
the world. Just get it while you can. I'm not sure how long it's gonna last. Knock on wood, but so far so good.
And that's what I tell people too. There's no harm in doing it. And most likely, as you've seen from almost all of your patients, and, I've seen from all of the people that I know personally who have done it, I don't know anybody who hasn't at least gotten a lot better. There are some people that still have some issues and some stuff to figure out. But you know, everybody that I know personally, it's made a huge difference in their lives. It's made a
Yeah.
huge difference in my life. You know, and I know from a lot of, especially talking to a lot of your patients, that it's for the most part a total no-brainer. So I tell people, you know, no-brainer. I wish that this had been available for me when I had first become sick. I love that. Aw.
So this patient made this, and she made this health detective. She painted this for me.
That's
For
a good
me,
one.
she a few other things too. Um, she's still sick. I can't get rid of her bands. They go completely off. They come completely back on. Her newer symptoms are stable, but they're still there, and and Rocky Mountain just won't leave. She's done 12 months for Rocephin. We've done 2 SOTs. Um, but as I tried to explain to her that even though she doesn't leave the house, I think one of her pets gets her reinfected
Oh my gosh.
because I've cut her IgM bands off and then they come back on. And you know, once you sequence through, things don't
They
go
don't go
left,
back.
they
Right.
go right. Immune
Huh.
system doesn't do that. And she's still a patient, and we still see her. Um, even if I can't fix everything, we still usually hold on to our patients because I try hard. Um, and I'm not here petitioning business. That's not what we have to do. But I am in this to win it because I want the testimonies. I'm just driven by testimonies. It's really the kicker for me.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't know. You like to make people not be sick.
Yeah, and together we can just help a lot of people.
Yeah. I hope, you know, this is probably a good segue for us to end this episode because I know we tend to get a little lengthy on some of these, and I think people
Sure.
like it when they're a little bit more digestible in small pieces. So I think maybe we'll wrap this one up for you guys for this episode. But thank you guys so much for watching and listening.
And let's talk about persister forms and biofilm and things like that next time, I think.
Yes. So I think we're going to do a whole episode on persisters, biofilms, and talking about antibiotics because I know a lot of you guys are confused about that. It's a tough thing to understand. I don't understand it very well myself. And then I know there's still a lot of questions for us to get through. Um,
Okay.
we've got more questions. I know a lot of people have been asking about mast cells, so I think maybe you just do like kind of like we did with Candida. We'll just do a whole episode just talking about mast cell. I think that would
Okay.
be helpful for a lot of people. But yeah, but thank you for this episode, and I think we're on episode 8. I don't remember. Thank you guys for joining us, and until next time.
This.
Bye.
Bye.